Hello, everyone. This is Maddie Paul reporting from the KELOLAND Digital Desk. We are awaiting a press conference with South Dakota Attorney General Marty Jackley as he plans to announce indictments in connection to 2 inmate deaths, along with charges in connection to a riot inside our state prison. Earlier today, we did find unsealed documents that did show one person who was charged in connection to a prison meth overdose, as we await for Jackley to speak today, which would be starting at 11. So as we wait, I want to talk about this story and those court documents that we found today. So we do know that a Sioux Falls woman has been charged in connection to the death of the man, an inmate who was inside the prison on May 15th. We found court documents today, and it's 49-year-old Malibu Ross, who is facing charges of distribution of a controlled substance resulting in death. Now, Ross is accused of distributing meth to Jason Garreau, who was serving sentences for attempted first-degree murder from Hughes County, possession of a controlled substance by an inmate from Minnehaha County, and a federal conviction for aggravated assault on law enforcement. And now Ross is one of multiple indictments expected to be announced by Jackley today during this news conference that we're still awaiting for right now. And again, he has been planning to announce these charges to these deaths that have been occurring inside the prison. And according to the South Dakota Department of Corrections, there have been 12 inmate deaths in the state custody in 2025. This is a developing story. We're going to continue to update it as far as it goes and as far as we see today. But so far, this is the one court document that we've unsealed today that shows that. We do know that there is plenty of people who are being charged in connection with these riots and these drug deaths in the prison. From what we've seen from court documents, there appears to be 5 people who were inmates that have been charged for manslaughter of some kind or serving a life sentence for murder or a 25-year sentence committing crime while armed in the jail. But again, this is the one charge that we have on our website right now for 49-year-old Malibu Ross in connection to that death that occurred on May 15th. Let's take a look and see if we have any sound yet from Jackley. We're still awaiting from the press conference for Jackley. As you can see here, once that starts, we'll be able to begin right here. And if you're joining us now, we are waiting for South Dakota Attorney General Marty Jackley to come and talk about indictments and announcements for inmate death connections throughout 2025, as we're still waiting to hear what he will plan to announce. Court documents, again, have shown that there are more than a dozen inmates facing charges for riots inside the prison, but we now know one person who is being charged for distributing meth and killing one inmate inside the prison. If you're just joining us now, I can go over that story that we've uncovered this morning as we still wait for Jackley to take the stand and talk about those plans and those charges that will be announced. So we do know that charges have been filed against a Sioux Falls woman in connection of dealing meth for a 39-year-old inmate in the state penitentiary, and this occurred on May 15th, according to those court documents. And this is for 49-year-old Malibu Ross. She is facing charges of distribution of a controlled substance resulting in a death. Now, Ross is accused of distributing meth to Jason Garreau, and he was serving time in the prison for sentences of attempted first-degree murder from Hughes County, possession of a controlled substance by an inmate from Minnehaha County, and a federal conviction for aggravated assault on law enforcement. And if you're interested in reading this article for yourself, you could always find that on KELOLAND.com. If you scan that QR code that you're seeing on your screen right now, you'll be able to see KELOLAND.com and find this article that I'm referring to. But right now, I'll keep going through the article as it was written this morning. So Malibu Ross, is one of multiple indictments expected to be announced by Attorney General Marty Jackley today during this news conference in Sioux Falls, as we will be airing that news conference once it becomes available and once he takes that stand. And again, all of these plans are just to announce the charges that are related and connected to 2 inmate deaths, along with charges in connection to a riot inside the state prison. And again, I just like to say from the story, court documents have shown that there are more than a dozen inmates facing charges from riots inside that prison. And we've heard from the Department of Correction that there have been 12 inmate deaths in state custody in 2025, something that we've been following as it's been released and coming out to us as the DCI has been investigating these deaths. We will be having a lot of reports tonight on Keloland for all of these different perspectives and responses, especially as we await to hear what Jackley will be saying in connection to these charges and these riots and these inmate deaths. Still waiting for Attorney General Marty Jackley to take the stand here, or the podium, I should say, not the stand, as he plans to announce some charges in connection to 2 inmate deaths in the state penitentiary and as well as some riots inside the state prison. Again, there's more than a dozen inmates facing charges for riots inside the prison, but Malibu Ross is one of the first who is not an inmate inside that prison, as we uncovered those documents today. Still waiting for him to take that podium. We uncovered these documents about Malibu Ross this morning as they're coming out, as Jackley's planning to announce. And again, all he's going to be talking about that we know of is the charges and indictments in connection to 2 inmate deaths, along with that connection to the riots that have been going on in the state prison. And we are waiting now for that. Let's see what's happening.
No, that's clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here we
If
go.
you're ready, we'll get started. You have the releases. The indictments have been filed. The other release is coming. I'll get you a copy, and we'll kind of go from there. Attorney General Jackley will be with a group of the DCI agents and maybe some of the attorneys. Okay?
Looks like we're still waiting for Attorney General Marty Jackley to take that podium right there. We were supposed to start this press conference at 11 a.m. It seems to be a little bit of a delay, but we are getting a press release that is coming in from the Attorney General's office, and I'll go ahead and read that to you. I'm trying to decide if I should show it or not. Oh, Jackley's taking the stand, and we'll go ahead and listen to him.
Everybody ready? Good morning. My name is Marty Jackley, South Dakota Attorney General, and I want to start out by thanking the public and the media for giving us the opportunity and time to complete and do a thorough investigation of events happening at the state penitentiary and to make appropriate charging decisions based upon the evidence. Today, I'm going to announce indictments occurring from 3 different events. The first 2 are overdose cases from February and May, and then the third are 4 separate indictments from the prison riot on May 27th. These indictments in total involve 26 individuals. It's important to point out that every one of these individuals under the United States Constitution is presumed innocent until proven guilty. I also want to take a minute to thank the Department of Corrections staff for their cooperation in these investigations, including the Special Investigative Unit that assisted us throughout the process. The first indictment is defendant Manarian Fuse. Fuse was an inmate in the South Dakota Penitentiary serving time for the discharge of a firearm in an occupied structure. This is related to the February 6, 2025 overdose death of Anthony Richards. The substance involved in this case is K2. Specifically, it was paper laced with K2. This is a 2-count indictment. The first count charges distribution of a controlled substance resulting in death. That is a Class 2 felony that carries 25 years in prison. Because Fuse was an inmate, there's a double counting, and so the maximum penalty will be 50 years. The second count is straight distribution of a controlled substance. That is a Class 4 felony that carries a 10-year maximum penalty, and again, because Fuse was an inmate, it is subject under statute to a doubling, so it would be 20 years. The second indictment is an individual that is not an inmate, so there won't be any double counting with respect to any of the maximum penalties. This involves the May 15th, 2025 overdose death of inmate Jason Garu. The substances involved in this case are methamphetamine and cocaine. It was transferred or alleged to be transferred during an inmate visit. This is a one-count indictment. It is distribution resulting in death. Again, that is a Class 2 felony that carries a maximum penalty of 25 years, but because not an inmate, there will be no double counting. The second range of indictments, or third range of indictments, are in relation to the riot that occurred on May 27th, 2025. These are in 4 separate charging documents. This occurred, of course, on May 27th, 2025 in Jamison Annex, specifically sections 1 through 4. Generally speaking, with respect to the riot, and the reason I use the word riot, that is a statutory legal term that the legislature has enacted laws that if it involves a riot, there are additional charges that I'll be discussing. Essentially, a riot has to involve 3 or more persons with assaults and disturbances. Generally, this rioting involved 40 different inmates. Ultimately, 14 inmates were treated for injuries. 4 inmates were hospitalized. With respect to 30 of the inmates involved, they're affiliated to 9 separate gangs, specifically the Boys or the TBZs, the Red Brotherhood, which is RBH, the Gangster Disciplines, the GDs, the Bloods, the Crips, the Northside Mafia, the Warlords, the East River Skins, and the Vice Lords. The charges include 24 inmates. There were no correction officers involved in this charging decision, but ultimately there are 3 categories of charges. I'm not going to go through all 24 defendants, but the charges range from aggravated assault, which is a Class 3 felony, carrying a maximum penalty of 15 years. Again, because these are inmates, that is subject to the double counting, so that would be 30 years. The riot, which is SDCL 22-10-1, involving 3 persons or more, is a Class 4 felony. That carries a maximum penalty of 10 years, which would be 20 years after the doubling. And then several simple assaults, which are Class 1 misdemeanors, also subject to doubling. Certainly the goal I have as Attorney General is to not run the prison. Any prison-related questions would need to go to the DOC. But my responsibility is to make sure if a crime is committed in the penitentiary, it is dealt with. As you can see today, I've set a no-tolerance position as Attorney General that if a crime is committed in the walls of the penitentiary, it will be investigated and it will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Lastly, I just simply want to thank the investigators and prosecutors involved. I thank the DOC special unit, but I also want to thank the DCI agents. When you look at a riot of this nature occurring on May 27th, involving 40 individuals, this was a thorough and complete investigation, and I'm proud of the work that they've done, and I'll certainly answer any questions that I can. Dan.
So did gang tensions prompt this riot?
I can't go into those details, but what I can tell you is you have 30 individuals with gang affiliations, 9 different gangs, and it seemed very coordinated.
So to what degree do we have a gang problem in the South Dakota State Penitentiary's campus?
Certainly, you have a right, this is America, to be a member of organizations. Under South Dakota law, there is a gang enhancement that if it's tied to that gang activity, you haven't heard me talk about those enhancements in part because as we've mentioned, the maximum penalties and the doubling, these are essentially maximum life sentences when you take into account the time these individuals are already serving.
With regard to the overdose deaths, so we had one, the K2 transferred to Anthony Richards by a fellow inmate.
Yes.
How did that defendant acquire the K2 and get into a position where he could transfer that to Anthony Richards?
Those continue to be ongoing investigations and would be subject to additional indictments.
Okay.
Can you explain the paper-laced K2 for someone that may not understand that?
Oftentimes you'll hear terms of heroin that's fentanyl laced. You'll hear paper that's laced. It's just a way to intake it into the body. These drugs can be taken into the body different ways. That's one of the particular ways. And really beyond that, I can't get into the details of the evidence. I can't get into specific evidence. I can tell you that these investigations involved K2, which was on the paper. I can tell you that the other overdose death was methamphetamine and cocaine. I can tell you that the one was as a result of a non-inmate visitation, which would explain why we've indicted a non-inmate, and there's no double counting.
So it was a visitation?
Yes.
Non-inmate, it wasn't mail or
Nope.
package or anything?
Nope, it was a visitation. It was a visitation.
Are there more charges coming then? There's been multiple deaths there, more than what you've listed.
So at this point in time, these are the charges. With respect to overdose deaths, I know that the public is generally aware there are 2 additional overdose deaths that we are investigating, but they're in various stages of that investigation. One of the challenges is before I would move forward on an indictment on an overdose death, I need to have an autopsy and not the preliminary, I would like the final, and I need to have toxicology. And of course, we don't do that at the Attorney General's lab, so that is subject to the testing institute that does it. When you involve substances like methamphetamine, cocaine, those are easily tested. When you get into K2, those are sometimes taken to another lab, in this instance, Pennsylvania.
With the death of, Guru, was that a loved one who visited him and transferred the drugs that resulted in his death? Are you able to comment on how that exchange took place?
I can't really comment about the relationship beyond it was during a visitation. So it wasn't through the mail, it wasn't through other inmates, it was through a visitation.
And that's how the drugs got in?
Yes.
He said there was four inmates hospitalized, 14 treated. That doesn't totally square with what we heard before. We heard that other inmates were maybe hospitalized means they had to stay, right? Because it sounds like some people were actually treated there, some people were treated at a clinic, and then apparently 4 people had to stay. They were
Certainly these were stabbings. These involved different degree of injury. What I can state is that the 14 inmates at different levels had to be treated, and 4 of them had to go to the hospital for treatment. I'm not saying they had to stay overnight, but they were treated.
so only 4 people left the building for treatment?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So my other question is kind of math related as well. I saw in the indictments that were available earlier today, I saw the names of 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 victims. I'm assuming that since there was one that I don't have, how many victims in total are we talking about here with these 24?
So the victims are specifically named in there.
That's what,
Certainly I'm not standing here telling you there were no more victims in that. I'm telling you those are the charges that the evidence has shown at this point in the process.
I guess what I'm getting at is, are some of these people also injured? Were there people who were injured in the fight and they weren't listed as victims because they were part of it?
Well, I think I'm understanding your question. So there were, in a broad sense, 14 injured. I'm going to suggest to you that of the 24 indicted, they might all be taking the position they're victims, and that's certainly their right. I'm just stating that based upon a thorough investigation and based upon the evidence that I've reviewed, I've made a charging decision that 24 individuals are subject to the 3 levels of charges that I've described.
Ballpark, that riot on the 27th of May, how long did it last? Half hour, hour?
Very short. It was a short, you've got stages where, there's obviously treatment having to apply, people are being moved around. The actual disturbance itself was not overly long. But, once you have that, you have response time, you have addressing getting proper treatment, making administrative decisions. Certainly, at the point in time, we arrived, the disturbance was primarily in a safe situation, but addressing the aftermath.
If you or I have a loved one inside the state penitentiary or Jameson Annex, to what degree are we concerned about their safety and ability to be okay in there?
You know, those are positions for the Department of Corrections. The Attorney General does not run that. What I would say is it just became safer today because we've made it clear that the Attorney General is not going to tolerate criminal activity behind the walls. That criminal activity includes drug use. That criminal activity includes gang-related activity and violence.
Can I do just one more question about the victims? In the past, we've heard about situations, specifically a year ago over in Durfee, where specific inmates were targeted, and that's the reason it started. We're going after these guys. Is that what's going on with these victims, or are these melee victims?
I can't get into the specifics of the evidence in the case. They're certainly presumed innocent. There will be more to come on that. These are indictments. I'm pretty much limited to the scheme of what happened, which I think I've laid out. Some details on 4 indictments that involved 40 individuals, 30 gang members, and I just can't go into further detail.
Just one more, to put a finer point on, I guess, Dan's question. I mean, if I'm somebody who has a person behind the walls, are there targeted bits of violence going on? Is that something that you guys are investigating either here or in another context where?
I mean, I think it's fair to state that, you know, and I've all along said, in my view, and based upon the investigation we did, this was coordinated. That this didn't just happenstance occur the way it did. So to the extent you glean from that, it's somewhat targeted. I think that's probably a fair interpretation of it. What I will say again is the Attorney General is not in charge of corrections. But what the Attorney General is in charge of, if there's a violation, either a criminal violation involving violence or drugs, it will be investigated and addressed. And today's announcement of 26 individuals under indictment goes to that.
Do you do any collaboration or present any information that could be preventative for this happening again in the future?
You know, again, that's for the Department of Corrections.
Okay.
We work very close to their special unit, those investigators, but to the degree that they debrief and go over matters, that is something I'm not a part of. Certainly, we make available the information we obtain in these indictments. They're generally aware of certainly the gang-related affiliations of the 9 gangs. We provide any information they would desire on that. But those are decisions, again, the running of the prison system is up to the Secretary of Corrections and the various wardens, not the Attorney General.
Do inmates have a direct line to you guys if they want to report a crime from their tablets or otherwise, or do they have to report to the DOC and then it gets to you?
It would typically be to the DOC. I say typically. I mean, I've been involved in conversations where a defense lawyer may reach out to me as Attorney General, or we may be involved in a case where an inmate would share something with DCI. So I wouldn't say that is a direct line, but it occurs fairly frequently.
But in other words, if I'm an inmate, if John Holt's behind the walls, I can't send an email to the DCI saying, I heard something's going to go down and have it go to you directly.
No, that would generally go through corrections. And the reason it needs to go that way is because corrections are there. They're administering the prison, and you have to realize I typically have ongoing cases with many of these inmates. I'm the guy that prosecuted the cases, or my team did, or the state's attorney did. So that would not be the appropriate process. I think defense lawyers would raise appropriate concerns with that. But it doesn't mean that a defense lawyer doesn't reach out to me personally. It doesn't mean that we might be investigating a case where an inmate says, I have this additional concern or information, and we take that seriously.
You have a whole team here behind you. Can you talk about how you work together and the importance of a cohesive team?
Yeah, I mean, I would tell you that, you know, the shining star at the Attorney General's office is a DCI. I'm blessed as Attorney General to have a team that when something like this happens, I know they will be there immediately. I know that they oftentimes don't sleep at night, that they work the case up appropriately, they communicate with the prosecutors, they go gain additional information, talk to further witnesses. They do their job and they do it very well, and that's why I had indicated to them that I appreciated their work that they did on this, especially with this turnaround. I mean, we felt it's important to make these charges and to make this announcement for the safety in the prison. Otherwise, there's a 7-year statute of limitations, and we moved forward in a due diligent fashion because of what's at stake here, and what's at stake is prison staff safety and other inmate safety, and I feel this response is appropriate given those dynamics.
Are you happy with the level of communication and collaboration between your office and the DOC?
I'm very happy with the Special Investigative Unit. I mean, that's primarily who I'm going to work with. That's who our agents are going to talk to because it's investigations. Yes, when it comes to them, I really don't have further communications with DOC regarding that. Again, they work for the governor. They don't answer to me. I think that it's appropriate that we have those communications with the Special Investigative Unit, and I'm happy with those relationships.
I think some people reading or watching these news items will see that list of gangs and their eyebrows might raise. Like, whoa, that's not 1 or 2. That was what, 7, 8, 9 that you listed?
9.
Okay, that seems high. Did your eyebrows perk when you saw that? The degree to which there's that many gangs involved here?
This is probably more that I'm normally involved with in a particular investigation, but as a prosecutor and as a defense lawyer, there is a gang prevalence in the penitentiary. I recognize that. And again, the legislature has armed prosecutors with additional authority when needed and when it can be proven that there are enhancements with respect to that gang activity. And again, today I did not need to do that because essentially many of these charges are the equivalent of a life sentence. John?
You starting in May, or starting in February and then working forward, or are there incidents, you just mentioned the statute of limitations, made me think of this. Are you looking at anything that happened a year ago? Because there was a year of crazy stuff. Dan and I saw some of it last year. I mean, how far back are you looking for criminal activity?
I mean, look, the Attorney General's office and the state's attorneys prosecute 68,000 cases a year. We have open investigations, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that charges are imminent on them. I will tell you that with respect to what has occurred recently, there are 2 more overdose death investigations that are occurring. They're not at that stage to make announcements such as this. And whenever you have a riot situation or an assault, whether it be in the penitentiary or a bar situation, there are additional individuals we are looking at, but we are not at the point where the evidence would justify further criminal charges. They might. It's not unlikely that you don't have additional indictments come out of a situation like this, but I'm not announcing that today.
But in other words, the contraband stuff that we saw in September and October last year and the rioting that we saw at Mike Durfee, we saw indictments for the March activity in 2024. We're seeing this, and you have overdose deaths, and anything in between. Don't hold our breath. Is that fair?
Again, investigations at different stages, like all investigations, you may reach a point where you're prepared because there's probable cause and a reasonable likelihood that a jury would convict where you move forward. But those investigations are not at that charging decision stage.
Anything else? Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Call me if you need me.
Thank you.
This is Maddie Paul jumping back in as they are wrapping up their presser right there. It looks like that our connection is cut off, so I'm going to come back onto the camera here. Hello. I took some notes during this press conference that I want to just debrief a little bit in case you're joining us now and you missed the beginning of what Attorney General Marty Jackley has been saying. So if you see me looking this way, it's just because I'm referring to my notes that I took. as I continue to talk to you. So we know that there are 26 charges total that Marty Jackley has announced. 24 of them are to inmates, and then 2 charges are to non-inmates, to put it frankly. So we do know that there's at least 2 charges for overdose deaths within the prison, and those drugs were, in one case, K2, and then in another case, it was meth and cocaine. And this is all according to Jackley. And then we know that 24 charges were in connection to a riot that happened on May 27th, specifically in the Jameson Annex, section 1 through 4, he said. And Jackley said that this riot was a very short riot. One thing that I caught that was kind of interesting was how he defined a riot as a statutory legal term. And he said that it must involve 3 or more persons in an assault or some sort of disturbance. And then because of that, it can imply more charges later on. And then he also added that all of these charges are subject to doubling because they are of inmate status. As we continue to look at this, with this riot that occurred on May 27th, we did do a report back in May, a couple days after the riot had occurred, and Jackley had told Keloland News that he suspected some gang activity that was a part of this riot, and today he confirmed it, that there are 9 separate gangs that he identified, including such as the Bloods and the Crips. These 9 separate gangs that were a part of this riot that occurred on May 27th. Now, he wasn't able to give certain details on gang tensions within the state penitentiary or any of those types of details, but he did say that in his own view, and according to the investigation, he believes that this was coordinated, that the timing of it was very targeted. He also mentioned that the Attorney General is not in charge of corrections, which I believe is important. But if there is a criminal violation, he said that he was very adamant about this, then it will be investigated, it will be addressed, and after that investigation is completed, then charges will result as it must and as it could. He also did say something interesting, is that there is a gang prevalence in the penitentiary. Again, these charges are subject to doubling because of the inmate status. But at this point, these are all the charges. So we're still looking at what happened and the charges that are occurring for 2 other deaths that we know about within the state penitentiary. But at this time, Jackley said he is just not ready to charge or make those charges, make those indictments right now, because he wants to get the full toxicology. He wants to get all the reports and testing done before he himself makes that official decision. If you're joining us now, just debriefing a little bit about what we heard with the press conference that took place with South Dakota, I keep saying that, South Dakota. Again, let me restart. We just had a press conference with South Dakota Attorney General Marty Jackley, as he was talking about the charges that he is now releasing in connection to overdose deaths within the prison, the state prison, as well as charges connected to a riot that occurred on May 27th. Just going over my notes again about what took place, we do know that 24 inmates have been charged and then 2 non-inmates have been charged. So we're looking at 26 people involved with charges for these riots and overdose deaths. We do know that in one case there was K2 for an overdose death, and then in another case there was meth and cocaine. And we do know that with the meth and cocaine, we did get our court documents unsealed, and who was charged and who is being accused of this crime of distribution resulting in death is Malibu Ross. We can get to that in a second. But the other 24 charges are resulting in a connection to a riot that occurred on May 27th in the Jameson Annex. Jackley said this riot was very short, that it didn't take too long. Again, if you're joining us now, I thought one thing that's very interesting to note, the statutory legal term of riot, as Jackley had put it, is it must involve 3 or more persons in an assault or some sort of disturbance. And because of this, it can imply other charges later on. And charges are subject to doubling in this case because we're dealing with inmate status, as he was saying. We did a report, to our reporter Tom Hansen actually did this, and it was about the connection of gang activity within the state prison resulting with this riot. And at the time, Jackley did say that he suspected some gang activity that was involved in the riot, and today he confirmed it. There's 9 separate gangs that he listed to be involved or that were involved with this riot. And two examples of that. Those gangs are the Bloods, the Crips. He listed the other ones. Dan Santella, our reporter, was there at the presser today, and he will be making a full report of what we know in connection to these riots and these overdose deaths. But in Jackley's view, he said, and according to the investigation, that this was coordinated, this riot and its gang activity. It was targeted. And he said that it is not his duty to be in charge of corrections to this. That is for the Department of Corrections. But if there is a criminal violation, then it's up to him to step up to investigate with his team and then address those problems. But he did say that there is gang prevalence in the penitentiary. According to a press release that we had gotten earlier from the Attorney General's office, I'm just going to refer to it right now. The 24 inmates charged in that riot have been charged with either felonies or misdemeanors, and those charges, they just range from 3. And so we have aggravated assault, simple assault, and rioting. And, the assaults that did take place resulted in 14 inmates being injured and 4 taken to local hospitals. And according to the Attorney General's office, maximum sentences for individual defendants can extend up to 80 years in prisons. And all these court appearances for the defendants will be scheduled at a later time. We are unsealing documents now and looking through those. So if you want to have updated information, we are developing these stories, and we will continue to look at it as we go into our evening newscast later tonight. Again, as that information becomes available to us, we're going to make it available to you. But right now, we know that court appearances will be scheduled at a later time, and that all defendants are presumed innocent until under the U.S. Constitution. But these are charges that Attorney General Marty Jackley has made as of today. I just want to repeat some facts that the Attorney General's office had found with the riots specifically. So we have those 24 inmates, just inmates that have been charged with the suspected gang activity that we now have from 9 separate gangs. And all of the charges range from either a felony or a misdemeanor for just 3 charges, and that is aggravated assault, simple assault, and or rioting. And, this attack that took place, this riot, it resulted in 14 inmates being injured and 4 transported to local hospitals. And again, the maximum sentences for individual defendants can extend up to 80 years in prison. During the press conference, Jackley had said that there is a gang prevalence in the penitentiary. And because of these charges, or because of the inmate status, I should say, these inmates are subject to having doublings of charges in their sentences because of it. At this point, these are the only charges that we know of. There are still 2 other state prison deaths to be investigated by the division, the DCI. But Jackley said he's not ready to make charges yet in connection to those 2 deaths because he needs completed information. He needs certain reports to come in, certain testing that needs to be concluded, and then he can give more information about the charges that we can be aware of. But right now, we do know of 24 inmates and 2 non-inmates that have been charged. So we're looking at 26 people total. 2 separate overdose deaths, one involving K2 and the other one involving meth and cocaine, and then 24 inmates being charged for or in connection to a riot that took place on May 27th. Just want to go over one last time the court documents that we found earlier today for one of the overdose deaths, and this is the one that was in connection to that meth. And so we do know that a Sioux Falls woman has been charged, and her name is Malibu Ross, and she is not an inmate within the prison. Her charges are distribution of a controlled substance resulting in death. She's accused of distributing meth to Jason Garreau, who was serving a sentence for attempted first-degree murder from Hughes County, possession of a controlled substance by an inmate from Minnehaha County, and a federal conviction for aggravated assault on law enforcement. And so Ross is one of these multiple charges that we had just heard from Attorney General Marty Jackley in Sioux Falls. According to the South Dakota Department of Corrections, there have been 12 inmate deaths in state custody in 2025. We're still waiting to hear about the charges for 2 other state prison deaths, but at this time, Jackley is not ready to make that sort of announcement until all sorts of testing is concluded and taken place, and then he can release the charges. One last time, I will go over what Jackley has said in his presser, and then we can wrap up this this stream. Thank you for watching. But we do know that 24 inmates have been charged and 2 non-inmates have been charged in connection to overdose deaths within the state prison and also a riot that took place within the prison. So we do know that in one case there was K2 in the prison, and then in another case there was meth and cocaine. And then when it comes to the riot that took place on May 27th in the Jameson Annex, Jackley said this riot was very short, but it did involve 3 or more people who made an assault or some sort of disturbance, and that can give out those charges. Jackley did note that he has identified with his team 9 separate gangs that were involved in this riot. And, you know, some examples of that include the Bloods, the Crips. He said in his view, and within this investigation, that this was coordinated and was targeted, he said. But he is not in charge of corrections. That is to the Department of Corrections. And if there's a criminal violation, then it is up to him and his team to investigate it and to address that. But he did say there is a gang prevalence in the penitentiary. And these charges that are listed, you know, they range from aggravated assault, simple assault, and rioting with just the 24 inmates who have been charged. Those are felony to misdemeanor charges. Those charges are subject to doubling because it is inmate status. It's given to people who are inside the prison. And at this point, I must say once again that these are just the only charges that we know of. We know that Jackley is investigating 2 other state prison deaths, but at this time he is not ready to make charges because he wants more completed testing and reports to come in for his team before he makes those final results in those final charges. I think we've listed everything that we need to uncover with this press release that we have just seen from Attorney General Jackley. We will have a full report tonight in our evening newscast. I believe it will be 6 o'clock with our reporter Dan Santella, who will be going over what exactly Jackley has said, looking over court documents, looking over anything that's been unsealed that will be going into the afternoon and into the evening, is that you can see. As it becomes available to us, we will make it available to you, as we have when we saw that unsealed document for Malibu Ross, who was accused right now of distributing meth into the state prison and resulting in the death of one of the inmates, Jason Guerreau. That is everything that I believe I have for you now. Again, the biggest takeaway is we have 24 inmates charged, 2 non-inmates charged with overdose deaths, and then in connection to a riot that took place. And Jackley has said there's gang prevalence in the prison and that he's identified 9 separate gangs that were involved. He even said it himself that he believes that this was a targeted event. And we're still waiting for more charges on 2 different state prison deaths. I believe that's everything I can give to you at that time. Thank you for watching this press release. Thank you for watching Kellerland News and watching this on kellerland.com. If there's more live stream events, we'll be certainly happy to give it to you. Thank you for joining me at the digital desk. This is Maddie Paul reporting, and you can see more tonight at 6 o'clock on Kellerland News. Thank you.